Welcome to Adulting with Joyce Pring. Watch the full video of this episode on my channel, www.youtube.com/JoycePringTV. And if you want to level up your adulting game, check out joycepring.com/collections for my digital products and courses. So, for you guys, what would that look like as a Christian in this secular world? How do we celebrate with those who celebrate and mourn with those who mourn in a biblical way?
And that reminds me of the phrase like meeting them where they are.
Mm.
And I think it's going outside of your comfort zone uh, that we can best celebrate with those who celebrate and mourn with those who mourn. I remember one of my friends, her dad passed during the pandemic. And I had the option to stay at home. But then I knew in my heart, I knew it was the Lord's leading for me to just be there. I'm not saying I'm the best friend talaga, but I knew it was really just God's work in my life na I was led to, go out of my way. Baka magka-COVID pa ako, pero no eh.
Tsaka iba yung takot nun eh. Ng mga time na yan. Yeah.
It was pretty new then. So I was just there, just be there with her. And after a while, eventually, yes, she was mourning, but then we had an opportunity to catch up again after that. And then eventually I got to share who Christ was with her. And so it was not instant na kapag-share agad. No, but it was a process of being with them and going through life seasons with them. And I think the same way with Christ, diba? He was intentional in a way. I remember with Martha and Mary and Lazarus, he was friends with Martha and Mary and Lazarus. Yet when he found out about Lazarus passing away, hindi naman siya agad pumunta doon despite him knowing na he was already dead. Eh. But it took...
Jesus wept.
Yeah, it took time. It took time. And then eventually, because he wanted to reveal himself in a different light. He was the resurrection and the life, right? But outside of it, okay, yung purpose niya was para pag nandun ako, when I meet them, I get to mourn with them. I get to be with them at their lowest. And at the same time, I get to reveal my glory. When eventually, diba, he called Lazarus out. Lazarus, come out. So Jesus was intentional naman in a different way, that he decided to wait muna. So I guess it's different for each one of us, but there we see the end goal of everything when it comes to our relationships. It's to see God's glory and to see more of His love for us. So, yeah.
Like for me, yung bearing one another's burdens. Ako kasi like my close friends, I always try to make it a point that it's within a meal. It's in a shared meal. So for me, like bearing one another's burden would look like, bro, kamusta ka na? Kain tayo meet tayo dito, kain tayo.
Food trip.
Food trip talaga.
Tapos sa'yo na din yung burden of payment.
Ang sarap pala maging friend eh.
Yeah, but yung aspect na, like in the Bible, diba? A shared meal is a what do you call it? Is a form of intimacy in a sense. Na
breaking bread talaga.
Yeah, you really have to break bread with people. Because, like, dun mo naman makikita na, hey, we're spending time, like, you really get to ask the person, kamusta ka? Kamusta ka? Like, is there anything that I could pray for you? Is there anything that I can help you with? Like, being intentional with those kinds of questions na kung alam mo, he had a tough time at work, then, kamusta sa work? May pinagdadaanan ka ba doon? Like, ano gusto mong gawin? Like, I remember, like, may isang sermon ako napakinggan, Tim Keller, sabi niya, minsan, yung mga kaibigan natin, all they need is to sit down, to share a meal, just so that they could just feel lighter and better.
Yeah.
And it's a great privilege for you to be in that part.
Yeah.
Because you're being a friend. Like, nandun
Mm.
ka in the toughest of times for them. So, yun.
Mm.
And sa ating mga Pinoy, di ba? Di ba? Yung kamusta ka sa atin, kumain ka na ba? So,
Laging ganun.
and culturally advantage natin, in my opinion.
Oo.
Because we're very welcoming, we're very hospitable people. And sa,
At mahilig tayo kumain.
very
Yeah.
tayo kumain. And sa Bible even, nakalagay
Yeah.
doon, be hospitable.
Yeah.
So, it matters that, we welcome people, we break bread with them to make them, to ease the burden, to make them feel that, we're true friends.
Yeah, it's actually also very biblical. Like when Jesus fed the 5,000, it was in the context of before I preach to them, they need to eat.
Yeah.
So
Para hindi hungry yung mga tao.
it's biblical. It's very
Yeah.
biblical.
And na-convict ako recently of that because I believe it or not, I'm not an extrovert. Like, I don't like...
Di halata.
No. It takes a lot from me to spend time with people that I'm not super close with. Honestly, I don't... The way that I recharge is I sit alone, I eat alone, I read alone. I even sometimes ask my husband, can I just sit and eat alone? Because I'm so tired from my work, because this is what I do. I
Yeah.
talk to people. And my discipler of mine said to me, like, Joyce, are you really being Christ-like? Because Jesus is a lover of people, diba? And I was so convicted. Di ba nakakatawa? Pero totoo na convict ako. And I find that now that by God's grace, I am more convicted to spend time with people, to sit with them, invite them over for coffee, for a meal. We did that yesterday. We had 2 couple friends who came over and we're having merienda. Isa breakfast, it's like church kami. Tapos the next is merienda. And you're so blessed afterwards because you get to share their burden. And by sharing that burden with them, not only do you get to be a hand of blessing to those people, but they also bless you by reminding you of the grace that you've been given and the blessings that you've been showered, and how God is working in your life and how God is working in theirs. I think we live in a culture that's constantly telling us that joy lies within the fulfillment of our own happiness, of our own peace, of our own wants and needs. But in reality, the way that God has called us, joy comes in us answering the call to serve Him and to love His
Other
people. Diba?
Yes.
So we live in this constant barrage of lies na hindi. You go to your comfort. You go to what makes you happy. You go fulfill your dreams. But in reality, when God tells us to be present with people and to share their burdens, that's really where the joy comes also.
Yeah.
The more you focus on yourself, the emptier you feel.
Yes.
The more that you seek after fulfilling your stomach and your wants and your needs, the less that you get fulfilled, diba? But the more that you get present for other people, especially when it's so counterintuitive for you, which is how it felt like for me. Like, I could do this before for work, and I was doing it because it was my work. But for me to actually welcome people to my home and break bread and to ask them to spend time and to hear their stories, it took a while for me to be able to want that. But by God's grace, this is how God showed me na, wow, I was making my comfort my God. I was making my preferences my God. I wasn't defining goodness and love according to what the Bible is, which is, sharing the burdens, being present for people, loving people, and showing up for them. So, ayun, masyado na ako naging vulnerable. Cut na natin yun. Ayaw pala i-share. Okay. So, ang dami na natin na pag-usapan on how to become a good friend. And I think the important thing is to practice it, right? To apply these things that we've talked about. And, it might sound like we've talked about so many different things, so many different ways to be a good friend. But at the end of the day, the important part of everything that we've talked about is to practice it, to apply it in our own lives. So I wanted to ask you guys now a very practical question, which is, how do we practice empathy and compassion, active listening, especially to strangers or even non-Christian friends, especially when we, get to interact with them on a day-to-day basis? Ano ba yung mga steps para gawin yan?
I'm the worst person to ask this. Actually, literally, because my wife is a strengths coach.
Mm.
And in the list of strengths, empathy is one of them. And mine is at the bottom. So I was really bad at having empathy towards
Mhm.
other people. I'm very intellectual.
Mhm.
And so when someone comes to me with a problem, I'm like, oh, ito yung sinasabi ng Bible about that
How do
problem.
you solve
Apply
it?
mo, yun na yung that's it, di ba? Oh, this is the truth. Preach, preach, preach. And by God's grace, He allowed me to be married to someone who's very high in empathy. And what I learned is that there is a time to preach, and then there is a time not
Listen. To
not to
Hindi
listen.
to
ko kasi.
listen.
I like that.
Ano,
Yeah.
The story of my life. That's the story of my life.
yeah,
Oh, kung
and
maka-nod yung team ko, yes, yes, ganyan talaga siya. Parehas na parehas tayo.
yeah, and parang what I learned is that most of the time, initially, it is not the time to preach. It's the time to embody the love of Christ to the person that you want to preach to.
Mhm.
Have them feel it first, and then at the right time, you tell them the truth, diba, that will comfort them. But first, I think mahalin mo muna, like yung person, like
Mm.
support them, help them,
Be there for
be there
them.
for them, and then find the opportunity in the future after you've provided na, 'di ba, a comfort to those who are in need, or a listening ear to them. And so I think it's very important. Timing is very
Yeah.
important when it comes, and having genuine concern for the person, that you know if yung words mo or if yung truth is going to land on them at a right time.
Mm.
So that's a lesson that took me
A while.
Ilang years na
while.
din.
It's a lesson that I'm still learning.
Yeah, we all are.
Pero I actually I've learned this practical thing that my husband and I would always do. We're exactly the same. I'm more of the solution oriented type. If you come to me with a problem, I don't know why you're coming to me with a problem if you don't want it solved. As in, ganun akong type of person before. That would really hurt my husband, and I'm assuming will really hurt their friends if we're like that. So, we've developed this thing whenever my husband comes to me, who is also highly empathetic, between the two of us, siya yung medyo mas emotional, mas empathetic, mas compassionate. And I would always ask him a simple question. Am I listening or am I problem solving? Because I need to know what kind of person you need right now, because I can be both. It's hard for me to listen and just listen intentionally, but I know that sometimes that's what other people need, and I need to learn to do that. And to that, it's I think another lesson that we can talk about is sometimes you have to go out of your comfort zone and be the person that you aren't actually, but the person that you need to be, and the person that is needed in that
Yes.
moment, diba? So, yeah.
Yeah, for me it matters that you listen. Like you can only show empathy if you're listening to what the
Mhm.
person is saying. Like yung natutunan ko over the years, it matters to people that if they share something to you, and when you encounter each other again, naalala mo, you ask them
Mm.
about it. Kasi doon mo malalaman, di niya lang pala sinarili. I mean, nakinig pala siya sa akin. Kinikwento ko yun. Naintindihan niya pala kung saan nanggagaling. And people will really appreciate that. And minsan kasi like when people are talking, gusto mo gusto mo lang sabihin yung gusto mong sabihin.
Mm.
And sometimes what you're saying doesn't necessarily contribute to the conversation, to the problem that she has. And dun yung disconnect minsan.
Mm.
And natutunan ko na sa conversations mo with your friends, with strangers even, it matters that you know that you listen to what they're talking about, and then care enough to ask them if you encounter them
Yes.
again na,
Mm.
"Uy, kamusta na to?"
Proactive.
Like,
Yeah.
nakwento mo last time,
Mm.
nag-away kayo ng dad mo, nag-away kayo ng mom mo.
So, sino nanalo?
Exactly. So, I mean,
Nakichismis.
Yeah.
I mean, it's
Yeah.
beyond that. Parang,
Right.
mas malalaman kasi nila, nakikinig siya.
Mhm.
I mean,
Yeah.
he really spent time with me and listened to me, and like cared enough to give her thoughts if they ask for it,
Yeah.
and care enough to ask na resolve ba yung problem.
May discipler pa nga ako before na parang pag tapos na yung D group tapos tatanungin, "Oh, what are your prayer requests?" Talagang sinusulat niya kasi binabalikan niya daw the entire week yung prayer requests namin
Wow.
so that she can pray for us one by one. And that urged me na dapat ganun pala yung intentionality natin, no? Na when somebody says, ito yung struggles ko, ito yung gusto ko sanang ipag-pray, di ba? Na talagang isusulat mo because you really care for that person. And for me, when I heard someone was doing that for me, I felt so loved. Na wow, you care so much about me. Na napaka-minute detail nito ng buhay mo, di ba? Hindi mo naman to buhay, hindi mo naman to struggle, pero gusto mong mag-take ng notes, literal, para mabalikan mo yun at matulungan ako even in that prayerful aspect. So, amazing. Yeah. How about you, Krisha?
Yeah, I guess he touched upon it already. More than listening, you ask questions. In the middle of it. And I think I appreciate that so much, especially kapag in passing ko lang sinabi, and then a friend would ask probing questions. That means interested siya.
Yeah.
So yeah, it's going deep. It's going beyond the shallowness of it all.
Yeah. Love that. To be interesting, you have to be interested. That's something that we always say here on the podcast. I think that's basic communication lang talaga. But, parang I always get the question, how do you show people that you're listening? It's like, just listen. You don't have to like,
Actually
paano ba?
listening.
Nod? Ano bang gagawin natin? But it's the genuine care
Right.
and desire to listen to someone that shows them. Maramdam ng mga tao yun.
Yeah.
May sincerity, alarm tayong lahat, diba?
Yeah.
So, my final question for you guys is this. How can the ripple effect of being a good friend extend beyond our immediate circles, diba? Yung close family friends natin, community societies, and even generations? Bakit importante, kumbaga, na maging good friend tayo? How can it affect other people? Anybody can answer.
Yeah, actually, there's a description in Philippians on what the church should be. But I like to think about it as kunwari your barkada na ano, and it talks about having the same mind, and it talks about if there is any encouragement, do it. It talks about looking at each other's needs above your own. And if I look at the circle of friends and they're practicing that, it feels like, oh, that's a good circle of friends. And how the church functioned back then was they would look for each other's needs. If there was anyone who was in need, they would sell their stuff and then provide for them. And these churches would send out missionaries or would send people out to share the word, and they would provide for the apostles, and they would provide finances for them so that they can share. And I think that's how it works. If we are biblically good friends to one another, we're also equipping each other to be more effective missionaries to our friends.
Yeah.
Like if I have a good circle of friends, and if they support me, and I have what I need, or the confidence, they give me the confidence that I need, then I'd be more effective as someone who shares the Bible to my friends, because I'm not running on fumes. Kumbaga, I'm all energized, ready to go. Let's go out there because I know I have people who have my back. And I think that's why it's important that we practice friendship that is born out of the love of Christ.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think for me, it's in friendships that we get to learn how to relate with other people. Other people think, friendship lang yan. Hindi. I learn how to be a good wife or a good husband once I'm married. But here we get to see, okay, once we get to practice being a good friend with our small circle, then how we relate with other people outside of that circle, with our family, with the outer circle, even strangers, I think magiging ripple effect nga, as you said. So it's a perfect training ground for us to know how we can best relate with others.
Siguro for me, like the way it could ripple is if you received so much love, care from your friends, you realize na minsan, you could also extend that same love and friends, same love and kindness to others.
Mhm.
And magre-ripple lang siya kung natanggap mo yon
Mm.
at kung na-receive and experience mo yun. At the same time, if our love tank, if you call that, is full, diba,
Yeah.
you'll overflow eh. Mapapadama mo yun sa mga kaibigan mo, mapapadama yun sa mga pamilya mo.
Mm.
So I think it will ripple if you fully understood and you fully known that, oh, mahal ako ng mga kaibigan ko kasi they showed me this, they shared this to me, they encouraged me during these tough times. And eventually, like, ma-experience mo yun eh. Alam mo yung sarili mo. Like, people care for me.
Yeah.
And I think my duty as a friend, as a Christian, as a brother, as a friend, ipakita ko yun sa mga kaibigan ko.
Yeah.
Ipakita ko yun sa family ko.
Mm.
And I think that's when it ripples talaga. Like, pag
Mm.
alam mo, your cup is overflowing
Mm-mm.
and you have no other choice but to give what overflows to others.
Yeah, and no one is really created to just stand alone. No one is created to journey by themselves. And I think if you want to be salt and light in this world, you also have to be surrounded by people who want to be salt and light for you to be able to have that ripple effect. That's it for this episode of Adulting with Joyce Pring. If you liked this podcast, please don't forget to use the hashtag Adulting with Joyce Pring and also check out www.joycepring.com for the show notes and tag me on social media with you know it at Joyce Pring. I'll talk to you guys again soon. Paalam!